All right, everybody, I am here with Noah Berhan, also known as Life of a Black Jew.
Mhm.
Here, Noah, how are you?
Good. Glad to be here.
Good. Thank you for coming on.
Mhm.
So Noah is a little bit of a smaller creator for right now, but obviously we're always here to support everybody. So make sure that you like, comment, share all over. Make sure to go follow him on all of his socials. And so I really just want to start off because you are a black Jew, but you are not just like a black Jew that's, an American Jew who is black, but rather that you are from similarly from like Beta Israel or from East Africa. So can you just quickly tell us, like,
Mhm.
what is your story?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So it goes back a long time. So if I again, I could, I there are some holes within my story, more memory wise. So please bear with me. This is more like a general idea of the story. So basically, I grew up learning this from my dad, who learned it from his dad, and so on and so forth. But what happened is back in the old days, back when my family left the Gondar region, where a lot of the Ethiopian Jews were basically congregated in the 1800s, and moved to Eritrea, like on the border. There actually used to be a big Jewish community on that border area. Like my dad told me a story about how there's a church like around the border between Eritrea and Ethiopia that actually has Stars of David carved into the church itself. But unfortunately, due to forced conversions and of course war, there's a lot. The Jewish community in Eritrea is either severely reduced or small gatherings potentially in the countryside. I haven't met any other Ethiopian Jews within Eritrea besides maybe like a couple of relatives that I met when I was like 6 or 7. Unfortunately, they're passed away now. So it, yeah, in regards to that, so my family left in the 1800s, moved to Eritrea, and then they stayed in the countryside. It was
Wait, I'm
hard.
sorry.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. Could you clarify something real quick? Did you just say the 800s, like the
Oh
like
no,
the
sorry,
ninth
sorry,
century?
1800. Sorry, but
Okay. I
1800.
mean, look, it's possible, right? Like I'm just saying, like I just wanted to clarify because if you said that, like
Yeah,
that would have been a really fascinating fact
yeah,
that you
no,
can like trace your family all the way back there. But
yeah,
all right,
yeah.
so it's back to the 1800s, but nonetheless, okay. So
Yeah,
go for it.
1800s, yeah. But there is like legends, a couple legends in regards to how Ethiopian Jews got to Ethiopia itself. Like one that my dad told me was that I think it was one of the sons of, I think, Solomon, basically was living in Ethiopia and then went to go visit his father in Israel, in the land of Israel basically. So he basically met him and he loved the land so much. He stayed with him for a while, but then the son was like, I don't want to leave. This land is so beautiful. The people are amazing. I don't want to leave the land. And King Solomon said, okay, I will send with you the firstborn of every family within my kingdom to go back with you to Ethiopia. And so this is the offspring of like Queen Sheba and King Solomon. That's basically how the legend goes. So they basically went back with him to Ethiopia, and the legend has it that, have you heard the whole thing where like there's I believe it's called, I think it's the tabernacle, or
Yeah, yeah.
now it's a legend that's in Ethiopia. The thing behind that is that there's the idea that someone they took him back with them back to Ethiopia, and the legend just basically generated from that. So is it real? I don't think so. Again, these are all stories from when I was a kid, so these could, do with the information what you will. But yeah, so they basically say there's in the 1800s, and then during the during the 1800s there was colonization from the Italian Empire, back in the old days. So it wasn't the easiest time. I mean, my grandfather basically had to do a lot of things in order to make sure his family was protected from harassment for being Jewish. I mean, of course, he kept it inside the house to make sure that, even though we couldn't display it publicly, like no mezuzahs or no public display holidays, no Sukkot tents and whatnot. He basically made sure to, like, keep memory alive. And so what he did was he based a tradition that's done for the oldest, or like the head of the families, that the the father to the son basically passes down the lineage line, the name basically. So my name goes as Noah Berhan Bahre Berachi Ingida Zawaldi Hagot Ege Woodgiver Heno Gudubo Guzai Takaletion Meronklite. And Meronklite is supposed to be descended from the tribe of Benjamin. So it's basically a lot of memorization of names.
Oh my
essentially, in
God, I
order
can't
to,
believe you remember all of them. I don't think that
yeah,
people remember even like their middle names sometimes. I know that
yeah.
sometimes sometimes forget the spelling of my middle name because it has two T's
Hmm.
in Elliot. So that's incredibly impressive.
Yeah.
And so when did your family come to the United States?
Yes. So during the Eritrean Ethiopian Civil War, essentially, my dad, I believe, was a boarding student in Ethiopia. But as the war started ramping up and things started getting a little more dangerous, he decided he wanted to take part in Operation Moses. So he was hearing rumblings about Ethiopian Jews basically disappearing in the middle of the night, and he figured that this was, when he basically cleared up the rumor when he got to Sudan when he heard about the Ethiopian Jews basically leaving. So seeing as you want to take part in the operation, he basically tried to get to Sudan with the other groups of people. Of course, it was really treacherous. Like, you're dealing with, like, keep in mind, this is basically leaving Ethiopia, going through Eritrea, active war zones, by the way, and then going into Sudan. So you were basically dealing with the wild, illnesses, raiders, the Ethiopian military, who would basically try and prevent people from leaving, and and were also, like, would forcibly conscript Ethiopian Jews within Ethiopia to the military itself. So they were the Ethiopian government was not a big fan of the Ethiopian Jews in general. So it was hard for my dad. He did get to Sudan. Unfortunately, the Sudanese police basically detained him. They assumed he was some sort of intelligence agent, general, like, no evidence for it. But he basically was detained for a few months, and he was released the day after Operation Moses ended, and was exposed by the news essentially. Basically, Sudan basically cut all ties with Israel, and the Arab countries surrounding it were, of course, very upset with Sudan itself. So my dad basically had to deal with a lot of harassment. People tried to, like, almost kill him because they realized, they some people, I guess, look by visual, by they hear rumors like, oh yeah, he's an Ethiopian Jew, we should, take him out or something like that. And so he'd be harassed daily, and it was, yeah, he did what he needed to do to survive. And so finding odd jobs within Sudanese refugee camps and whatnot. And so, yeah.
Wow. And so obviously the choice for your father was to try to make his way to Israel or try to make his way to the United States.
Mhm.
And so what was the reason why he chose to go to the United States over Israel? And when did he emigrate here?
Yeah, yeah. I think he decided to go to the United States because he basically put his name into a lottery visa, I believe. I'm not sure how the process exactly worked, but what he basically told me was that each month, I think people were putting their names in and receiving, basically, sponsors basically fund money to have people come to different countries. So my dad basically had his name basically in a lottery visa for two countries, Canada and the U.S. And so what he did was, his best friend in the refugee camps with him, he gave his best friend the Canadian visa, and basically to have him basically fill out his name and basically go to Canada, and he'd go to America instead himself. Of course,
How do
he
you
did
feel
want
about
to.
that? Do you wish that he had taken the Canadian one, or are you glad that you're in America? I can
I
understand. Look, the healthcare is up there is tremendous, but the freedom down here is much better.
Yeah, I mean, I like the U.S. I feel like it's. I mean, I feel like either or I would have been comfortable in, but I like the U.S. a lot,
Okay.
honestly. Yeah.
And so then how did you end up in Seattle? Was that where he like first moved to, or did he make his way there?
Yeah, he first went to Texas, and then that's where a lot of Eritreans actually ended up in when they first started immigrating to America during the Civil
Hmm.
War and whatnot. But he basically went from Texas to California to go to community college and whatnot and get a college degree, and then he went to Seattle to go visit his friend in Canada, and then what happened was he basically, I guess, his flight, he missed his flight, and so he had to basically stay another night within Seattle in order to, go the next day to Canada. And he stayed with, I guess, a distant relative of his, who basically was like, "Here, let me find you somewhere to stay for the night." And this distant relative had a family friend, who was my grandfather, and he basically decided to stay with him. And he met my mom while she was sick that day. So
That
he, yeah,
is crazy.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and so I want to move a little bit into what you're currently doing because you mentioned to me that you are currently converting to
Mm-hmm.
Orthodox Judaism, but you obviously identify as an Eritrean Jew. So
Yeah.
what does that mean for you? Why do you feel like you have to convert into something like Orthodox Judaism as opposed to just start becoming more observant?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, look, this is no hate to Chabad. I love Chabad. Chabad and Orthodox Judaism. I love it's amazing. I love the culture, love people and whatnot. But in Israel, there is it feels like to be seen as fully Jewish, you have to go to an Orthodox conversion. And I want to make Aliyah in the future myself when I finish law school. So I feel like now it's not only an obligation. Also, I do want to be observant, fully observant. I do want to observe all the holidays, practice all the practices, all the prayers and whatnot. This is my ultimate goal. But it feels like I remember that experience I had when I was in Israel last time about 3 years ago, I think, where I was on the train going from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, and I met a Haredi man sitting right next to me. And I guess I don't know how we started talking. I saw his book and I said, "Oh, that's a really cool book you're reading." And then we started talking. He's asked me, "Ethiopian Jew?" I said, "Yes." My father's Jewish, and my mom is like, and basically he told basically plainly but bluntly told me, "You're not Jewish. Your mother's
Oh, so
not
your
halach."
mom is not your mom is not Jewish.
No,
I
no, yeah,
understand.
yeah.
Got it.
So he basically pointed it out to me. He's like, halachically speaking, you're not Jewish, and it's important that like you have to understand the certain laws within halacha. And I was like, okay, I understand. So I basically want to go through with it, even though I feel like spiritually I do feel like I am Jewish, and I have these experiences from my family to basically confirm that we are ethnically Jews. This is more of comfort for me because I want my own family to basically be able to be fully Jewish
Mm.
without them having to go through the same hoops I have to. So
Interesting. And so I guess I'm curious that like, did you talk to somebody, at the immigration center that then asked like, because I know that one of the challenges for a lot of the East African Jewish community,
mhm,
um, especially as I've spoken to others, is that there was this initial skepticism from both the Ashkenazi and the Sephardi rabbinate about how quote unquote Jewish you were, or like whether you had a right to Aliyah, and that was a basis for a lot of discrimination and bigotry and racism that is slowly but surely getting over in
mhm,
Israeli society. But obviously now like they're fully integrated, they are fully accepted as Jewish. And so did somebody at the immigration center tell you like, by the way, you might have a difficult time like claiming Aliyah if
mhm.
unless you do go through this conversion, like, or is it just for your purposes, as you mentioned, like, I just want to make sure that it's all good, that nobody has anything to say, because obviously you could go to Israel, meet an
Mhm.
Israeli Jew of, and whatever it is, a woman, and you're gonna have a kid, and it's all good. So what kind of prompted this, like, oh, like I better make 100% sure?
Yeah, I feel like it's a mix of both. To be honest, both concerns, basically on the feeling of like I actually called Nefesh B'Nefesh last year, and
Mm,
basically wanted to start the process because at post October 7th, a few months afterwards, I'm like, this is starting to get a little dangerous, and so I think I just need to start stuff immediately. So I called Nefesh B'Nefesh and told them like, look, I'm an Ethiopian Jew. My family migrated to Eritrea in the 1800s. I know there may be sex skepticism with it. Like I've been questioned by LL flight agents before. So at that point, I
well, look,
understand
we
like
all have. Okay, we all have, just
yeah
to like make sure, like we all have. By the way, like if for anybody out there who's listening about what it means to be questioned by El Al, so El Al is like the national airline from Israel, and so the way that they operate their security is you like get to the front and you like talk with somebody, and they ask you like a bunch of questions about like your Jewish background. And having led Birthright many times, I had a lot of kids that obviously had never been to Israel before. And so, they'd get up there, and the whole point of Birthright is to, strengthen somebody's Jewish identity. And so for a lot of these kids, they also didn't know anything. They didn't have a bar bat mitzvah. They didn't know the prayers. They didn't know whatever. And so someone would be like, so you go to synagogue? And someone would be like, no. And they're like, no bar mitzvah, no bat mitzvah? No. Do you speak Hebrew? No. And all of a sudden they're just like freaking out, like, what is going on? And I like, in reality, the whole point is that they're actually just looking to see if you're nervous, not necessarily if you're answering the right questions to see how Jewish you are. So I always got a kick out of it. But yeah, it's wild, like
yeah
how that they can be it, for anybody out there. But yeah.
yeah. I had the same same interaction. It's like I've been to Chabad as a kid for holidays. That's it really. And they're like, and this I said I'm Eritrean Jews, like Eritrean, not Ethiopian, like no. And I'm like, well, I am, but from now on, I would say Ethiopia. No, no. But yeah, but yeah, for the first reason, definitely. And then, but yeah, never said, do you know any rabbis from the old country or anyone that can confirm it from Eritrea and Ethiopia? I'm like, well, I didn't. I mean, like, there wasn't really much opportunities for anyone to become rabbis within Eritrea because, like I said, there's a lot of religious discrimination. Like, I lost family members through anti-Semitic violence myself. So from like more of my aunts, my relatives back in Eritrea. So it wasn't really much of an option for anyone to basically be able to study and become, ordained anywhere even. So it's because of that, definitely. But also I want to basically feel secure within myself, but also, it, I guess it definitely is more feeling like I want to be able to have something, be knowledgeable with of Orthodox Judaism, so I could be able to teach my own kids and then teach their kids, so on and so forth, so that chain can never be broken. So,
Can I
with
ask you something a little bit more personal? I want to dive in a little bit more quickly
mhm,
because I think for a lot of people, especially because so many American Jews are more reform, and there's a real tension between the more liberal values of acceptance and egalitarianism, and open-mindedness, right? While Judaism, for better or worse, has that closed-minded necessarily, in the sense of if you're mom is not Jewish, then you're not Jewish.
mhm,
And so for a lot of more liberal people, just Judaism itself, traditional Judaism can be quite a turnoff because they just look at that as being antithetical to their other values.
yeah,
And I think I would love for you just to maybe give a quick little bit about what is that tension that exists within you that says, I feel this Judaism, right? Like my relatives are from an ancient tribe of Jews, right? Like I can actually go all the way back and I can attest to that. Like we were a part of the tribe of Benjamin. While like how many Ashkenazi Jews can say that, right? How many
yeah,
Sephardi, right? How many Mizrahi Jews can really say where they're from?
yeah,
And your family has, like you just said, experienced anti-Semitic violence in a country like Eritrea, like Ethiopia, like Sudan. And where do you fall in line where you're saying, like, what do you mean? Like, I have had the same Jewish experience as anybody else, whether it's Ashkenazi Jews in Europe or during the Holocaust or anything else, or it's the Sephardi Jews
mhm,
that got kicked out of Baghdad or kicked out of Tunisia. Like I have the same Jewish experience, and despite the fact that you identify as Jewish, the fact that you believe that you are Jewish, there is this
mhm,
person that just looks at you and just hears that your mom isn't Jewish, and you're like, you're not Jewish, and yet instead of being pushed away from Judaism as a result of that, you
mhm.
actually say, okay, well, like challenge accepted. I'm going to make sure that like, so where does that, how did you end up going in that direction while so many people, especially on the younger end, especially in the more liberal end, end up going in the opposite direction and just saying, you know what, I don't want to be a part of a community like this. I'm
Mhm.
going away from it. So what made you do, what made you decide to get closer?
Yeah, yeah. Weirdly enough, COVID, COVID-19 definitely, honestly, had an influence on me where I mean, for the longest time, up to like I was like 18, 19, I definitely felt like, you know, I felt like I was Jewish, like ethnically speaking, but I didn't really feel like I was spiritually had skin in the game, whatnot, or whatnot. Felt like I had any place in it. So I go to holidays with my dad. My dad would take me to Chabad holidays, like for Hanukkah, Purim. I loved the noisemakers. They were amazing. But I spent more of my time with my mom going to church, Eritrean Orthodox Church. So I'm used to like traditions. At least I'm used to being very strict on certain things and stuff like that. Like I grew up not. It's weird. The Eritrean Orthodox Church for certain it tries to follow Jewish law and rights, but doesn't call itself a Jewish. It's a whole other thing. I'm not going to get into it, but yeah. So I grew up with tradition being strict in certain things, and so when COVID happened, and I left university at that point the first time, and I basically felt like I was in this weird spiritual spiral, I guess. And so after a year, I was working a little bit here and there in Seattle, and then I heard about Birthright, and I was like, oh, that sounds really awesome. Honestly, I'd like to sign up for it. So I signed up for it. Did the little spiel on the phone, like, yep, families from Eritrea and Ethiopian Jews, and I went. It was 10 days, and it was 10 days of pure amazement. honestly. Even though it was fast paced, I spent my time in the north in the beginning, in kibbutz in the north. Then I went down south to Beersheba, and then I went back up north to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. All amazing. Like I had like I got back to Seattle and I was like in tears because like it was basically like a homecoming for me. Because I for so long I felt like I was in this weird like two world kind of ideal of like, sure, I'm ethnically Jewish, but I grew up with these Christian values, and so what point do I like separate myself? And then at that point, I started going to Chabad, sometimes on Saturdays, a little bit here and there, and I started like trying to practice Hebrew on my own. My dad actually helped me a lot in this. He actually gave me a lot of Hebrew like CDs and tapes and music to listen to. He's my biggest supporter, man. He's my biggest fan himself. Yeah, he's great. And I basically felt like I had at some point, even though I know it's like for some people it feels like Orthodox is really like, it feels like, has these set of laws that want to push people away and whatnot. I honestly think for me, this is for me, I can't speak for anyone else, but I feel like it's keeping community together. It's keeping people together. It's this link of like, as long as, someone is observant, even though some, horses like Haredim and Hasidim, of course, they're like are super observant to the max. But I feel like, as long as I'm following these set of laws, and I'm long as I feel comfortable with it, this is me. This is who I am. And I feel like with living an Orthodox Jewish life, I can, be able to maintain those bonds that I have with my family and maintain the bonds of the Jewish people, the Jewish nation. And so, if for some people it may feel like it's really restricting and restraining, but to me, I've just grown up with tradition so much. This is just what I know. And so, yeah.
And so you said that you're practicing with Chabad, and so being in Seattle, the Pacific Northwest is quite a white place. And although I will say that I learned recently that there's a large Sephardic community there, especially from the island of Rhodes, which is another conversation for another time. So I'm curious, in terms of how you're approaching this conversion into Orthodox Judaism. And you said that you're going to Chabad, are you working with an Ashkenazi rabbi? Are you trying to find a Sephardic rabbi? Is there an Eritrean or, East African Jewish community up there, even small, that you can work with? Because I've had another conversation with somebody from Ethiopia, and some of the traditions are different for, and especially the difference between East Africa and everybody else, because they don't follow rabbinic Judaism. So for you, in terms of your poll, you have this foundation in East African Judaism, right? But also the place that you live is mostly white and obviously Ashkenazi and Sephardic. So how are you also approaching that balance as well?
Yeah. So I've been to a couple synagogues in Seattle. So the problem is where I live in Seattle, it's like 2 hours away from like my local, from the closest Sephardic synagogue. So like this is more like busing or driving distance. So it does take a little bit of time to get there, but whenever I do get a chance to, which I hope to be soon at some point, I do want to go back. Because when I went to there's a couple of Sephardic synagogues within Seattle, which I'm not sure how that works. Like they're so close in proximity together. I'm like, does one go to one, go to the other? I don't, that's for another time. But I've been to a couple of Sephardic synagogues within Seattle and whatnot, and they're great, honestly. I've actually heard in regards to Israel that a lot of Ethiopian Jews are being more absorbed to the Sephardic side of things, which I think is honestly really beautiful. Even though like Ethiopia has its own set of Judaism, it still has some, I guess there's still some parts missing, because there's a thing that a lot of Ethiopian Jews potentially could have left during the first destruction of the first temple. So there's, of course, or there's the idea where like a lot of them don't have like a lot, like it's like Hanukkah, for example. I don't think a lot of Ethiopian Jews were celebrating Hanukkah up until they got to Israel.
Correct. That's what the other somebody told me, that like, because Purim and Hanukkah are not a part of the Torah, that they don't celebrate it. And so in Israel, some have decided to adopt that, kind of the way that people who are not Christians like will celebrate Christmas just because like it's a fun cultural holiday. But there are other Jews that say like, no, like that's not a part of our tradition, and so we don't celebrate Hanukkah, we don't celebrate Purim.
Yeah, exactly. And then I've been to like, there's a Chabad near my home, so I like to go. I'm trying to go that more often, although I'm not perfect. Being a college student does take a lot of time on that. But yeah, I like going to both Ashkenazim and Sephardim like synagogues just because while they are different, definitely different in regards to how maybe do practice and whatnot. I think they're two sides of the same coin. I think they're really beautiful also. And so for me, even though I want to do more of like Sephardic conversion side of things, I find Ashkenazi practices also just beautiful, just the same. It's just I think it's I I do want to get to the point where I'll be able to be knowledgeable in both practices, be maybe just have in my own household blend both Ashkenazi and Sephardic practices, just because in Israel, like the way it works is that people people are doing like practices that maybe Ashkenazim, but they're doing like practices that maybe done by Persian Jews and whatnot, and so I think I like to say like the way I want to practice my, I guess, Orthodox Judaism the way I want to is more of like a mix of all types of like different of Jewish observances from different countries. So that's the way I want to approach it.
Awesome. And the last question I have is, you mentioned that you're a college student, and you're not going to move to Israel until after law school.
Mhm.
And so I'm wondering is, most people when they decide to make Aliyah, they do so either in one of two ways. Either like they do it basically immediately after high school and they're like, I'm going to go join the IDF. I'm going to make Aliyah. Like that's like, I am going to move to Israel.
Mhm.
Or others do it like very spontaneously. They're like, you know what? I'm gonna go move to Israel, and then they go and make Aliyah, like boom. But you have made this decision, but there's a lot that can happen in
Mhm.
between now and then, whether it's with college or with law school or anything like that. So, what made you decide to move to Israel, despite the actual time that you decide to move is so far away?
Yeah, yeah. I feel like wanting to move to Israel, it's this desire generated after I went to Israel the second time, where I spent 2 months living in Jerusalem, working with Eritrean Ethiopian migrants. A lot of them go through the Sinai, and because to escape from, of course, there's certain issues within East Africa. So I basically got to spend time within Jerusalem, and it was amazing. I got to like go to the Kotel every weekend and whatnot, and you'd be able to pray there, even though I didn't know any of the prayers myself. I just did my best in English, and that kind of went with it. So, but I being so that spiritually inclined at that point, maybe realized that I can see myself living in Jerusalem full time. This is great for me. This is like it's great for my health. It's great for my mental, great for my spiritual, and I even though everything's going on right now with the war and whatnot, if I had my law degree right now, I could see myself moving now. It's just the only thing stopping me is that like it's the economy side of things. Yeah, I've seen like how some of the stuff price is ridiculous, but I'm not. Yeah, but I do want to be able to have something that be able to help make money with. So having a law degree and then basically able to like maybe do the IDF in more of the legal, like I know there's like the legal branch, I think, in the IDF. So I could see myself doing that for maybe like a year, 2 years. And then after finishing, hopefully practicing a corporate law for or startup in Israel. Yeah, just be able to work and live there and be able to live in the country and live my best Jewish life.
Amazing. All right. So now I have one final question. I asked the first person this, and I kind of want to, and then I asked the second. I was like, you know what? Like, this is the question I'm going to ask everybody. So you have to tell me, what is your favorite food in Israel that is
Mm-hmm.
not shawarma or falafel? You cannot say shawarma. You cannot say falafel. What is your
Mm-hmm.
favorite food in Israel?
Jachnun. Jachnun, I'm sorry.
That is my man, Jachnun. If you don't know what Jachnun is, if you don't know what Molawach is, okay, it's a Yemenite, okay? It's a Yemenite, and it is amazing. And the next time that you are in Israel, if you go to Jerusalem, I think there's some in Tel Aviv, but if you go to Jerusalem,
Mhm.
in Machne Yehuda, in the Shuk, there is Jachnun Bar, and it is absolutely phenomenal.
Exactly,
That is an
exactly.
amazing answer. That means you are cultured. You are a cultured man.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I
Beautiful.
mean, yeah, it's just so like the tomato paste and the
Oh,
butter on the roll. I'm
it's
like,
so good.
mm,
Everything about it. Everything about it. As it turns out, there's another one. If you on your birthright trip, you probably did this because every birthright trip goes to Svat.
yeah.
And at the very top of the art gallery, like you go down the stairs and then you go into the art gallery, there is the food spot right there. and it's also Yemenite. And I did not know what the name of this food was. And if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, and I really hope that I'm not, but I could be. Is that it's called laklouch, I think, and it's also kind of like a Yemenite tomato paste, but it's not jachlun or molawach, it's different. But I was like, oh, it turns out that like all of my favorite Israeli food is actually just Yemenite food.
Yeah, that's interesting. Right, you gotta let me know. Like, so let me know the details of that location. That sounds delicious. Not gonna lie.
Yeah. So at the time, as long as it's survived, I don't know if it's got to have survived COVID and it's got to have survived the war. But I swear it's the only place. But anyways, but this has been amazing, though. I so appreciate you coming on here. I'm sure this will not be the only time that we talk, and I wish you the best in your journey to not only become the most fully realized Jew that you would like to be, as well as your journey to make Aliyah. And once again, everybody, please go and follow Life of a Black Jew on all of the socials. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. Thank you for having me, Zach.
Awesome. Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom.